Welcome to the Research Works podcast, brought to you in association with the Healthy Strides Foundation. Your hosts are Dr. Dana Poole
and Dr. Ashley Thornton, and we're here at the AusACPDM conference in Cairns, Australia, to interview world-leading researchers, clinicians, and people with lived experience
to support your practice in being more evidence-based.
Welcome to Research Works podcast here from AusACPDM in
First time having to
Cairns.
say it. Well done, very good.
We are very privileged to be joined this morning by two guests.
Yes.
Our first two-guest episode at the conference, Elegast, Monbaliu and Petra, Karlsson. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Well, you guys are officially our first episode recording of the whole conference. But the best thing is you guys have just done your breakfast session. And your breakfast session, which really caught our eye, was titled Independent Mobility, Communication and Computer Access in Severe Cerebral Palsy, the current evidence to support new technologies with alternate interfaces. Buzzwords galore. I think I love that a lot. But we thought we might just really start off by just starting quite broadly. I know you had quite a few learning objectives within what you wanted to cover this morning.
Yeah.
But the evidence in this area has come a long way of recent years. I remember over probably the last 10 years, there's been more and more evidence in this area. Can you give us a bit of a summary snapshot about where that's at? Everyone's going to come out now, everyone. Wait for that.
I think for very severe CP children and adults, it was a challenge the past 2-3 decades.
Yeah.
Just to give you an example, when I started as a PT 25 years ago, and the first child having in my hands, I asked my colleague, I was coming fresh from school, and I asked my colleague, what do we have to do? It was a child with very severe dyskinetic CP.
Yeah.
And her answer was, actually, I don't know. And my second question was, but okay, where are we heading to?
Yeah.
And their answer was, actually, they cannot learn. You cannot learn them motor skills. So where we are right now, having new technologies also, and the evidence using these new technologies, and bringing them, of course, to a higher level of mobility, communication, and, of course, the window to the world, we're coming from quite far.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting.
Yeah, and due to the sort of complexities, there's mainly observational studies.
Sure.
So that means that, in a sense, the level of evidence is emerging and brewing. And I think as researchers, we, what is it called? Challenged, and also to think outside the normal sphere of randomized controlled trials for our groups that we want to work with might not be the best practice.
Absolutely.
So how can we use other research designs to sort of further increase? So it is a growing and emerging field still.
Yeah.
It's something we've talked about on the podcast previously. I think, being able to utilise some of those historically might have been considered less rigorous scientific designs, but we know now there is enough evidence out there to show that actually this is a very robust way of developing the evidence base for these children who are, it is a real challenge to get them into those bigger studies, and actually the, single case experimental designs provide really rich data, don't they?
Yeah.
And we will have more flexibility to sort of look at really complex things. So it's exciting.
It is.
And it is a challenge for the upcoming years, based on the lessons learned from the past, bringing them in the present to make sure that we translate them into the future. That means actually that using new designs, that is giving us the possibility to bring it from indeed our practice evidence towards evidence-based.
Yes.
And that's a huge difference compared with 20, 30 years ago.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one other challenge, I'm sorry, is so some of the interventions we work with is brain-computer interface and exoskeletons and things like that. And sometimes there is also, we were discussing last week with our team, the ethical challenge of when a device is not ready for the market yet, but you can show that it has very promising evidence.
Yes.
So we still need to do it, but it is that balance too of how to show and at the same time sort of be able to manage expectations and
such a true point.
Yeah.
And that's technology, and it's also it was wonderful. Even and Hannah Divney was talking about it yesterday. We're in this like instant gratification. We want it straight away.
Yeah.
We see something new, we want it.
Yeah.
But it is so important to test and to understand the parameters of what the device might do, because a lot of technology isn't exactly cheap, is it? Like it does cost a fair bit of money to put together. So what's the spectrum of current technology? Because there's a range. It's low tech right up to the really high tech, isn't it?
Yeah, well, if you have the range of low tech towards high tech, of course, there's a lot available already. And technology is here to stay.
Yeah.
And we have to embrace it. But at the same time, we have to embrace it in a way we use it in the right way.
Yes.
But we also can measure it,
Yes.
how the evidence is and how it's best used for the best people in the best way and the best moment of that time window of the age, which age is. Important in technologies is, and certainly in the clinical field, is clinicians who are not using technology will be replaced very fast by clinicians who are using technology and artificial intelligence.
Yes.
And that's a real challenge also for us researchers / clinicians to make sure that in education it is there embedded in the education because it is here to stay and we really have to embrace it.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's such a good point and such a big consideration in, as clinicians, our professional development and, you know, I think a real, you know, coming on board with changes to the clinical landscape, I suppose. And it's a challenge, and we've spoken about that previously as well. You have to not be so proud as to, you know, hold on to the way that things have always been done and embrace new ways of doing things, because ultimately it's for the benefit of your families that you're working with.
Yeah.
And it is a broad range, and so we have tried to sort of classify it like mobility, communication, and cognition.
Yes.
Like how can we use it for assessments, and how can we use it for interventions, and with the goal of full participation as is meaningful participation for the individual.
Yes.
Yeah, if you talk about what really matters for people with severe CP in general, all CP people. And in general, all people with disabilities, with lived experience, is if we really ask them what's important for you as a person with lived experience, but also for the families and the environment, is 3 things are really welling up within that ICF framework. And that's reaching the highest level of independent mobility.
Yes.
But also reaching the highest level of communication.
Yes.
And also that leisure and learning aspect there in school, but also at later age, it's really important. So how do you do that?
Yes.
Of course, it is, asking them what's there, people with what's there, that will be in the benefit of you to bring you that to a higher level, and then translate that again into research questions and bring the answers of these research questions again to the clinical field. And that's exactly what we're also doing in our research lab, is focusing on and mobility and communication using new technologies.
Yes, and I really want to delve into that because, well, we'll make sure we talk about that. But can I just make a point here? Because we did speak a little while back, maybe just a year ago, to one of your colleagues who didn't travel out to Australia this time, Saranda Bektashi, and she was talking about what really has stuck with me ever since our conversation was our young people, they want to send a WhatsApp message. They want to be able to go on Facebook. And we often talk about being able to make a choice, yes or no, but how about the things that a lot of young people do now? And I think that has stuck with me so much in terms of just access and where we need to get to because they see all their peers doing
That's
these things.
That's their world, isn't it?
It is.
Everything happens online now. And for young people and how they interact with each other and how they interact with their world.
And some devices already cater for it, but that is some devices that are quite big and bulky. If you have less, if you don't need to use those devices but you still need help, there still needs to be tweaks and software that can sort of allow it, absolutely, and provide sort of like an individualized input.
And of course it's what they want, but we also talk about if you look up the United Nations rights, it's a right to have the highest level of independent mobility. It's a right to have the tools to really communicate.
Yes.
And it may be very basic. but we really should give an answer towards it.
That's right. Yep.
For example, for mobility, if a person is pushed from point A to point B, depending from another person pushing that wheelchair, what difference can you make if they really reach a level of driving on their own with a powered wheelchair? And that matters. And it's not because then it's a cost saving for example, society, that's the other person is not pushing anymore, but it's also the development of their own well-being, and that's quality of life, and that's crucial. So that's exactly what we as clinicians, researchers, but even also policymakers, all stakeholders involved here, with people with CP, severe CP, with people with independent, with disabilities. It's really important that we give a real answer to that. And to collaborate with each other.
Yes. As you're talking, I'm thinking back to where we started around, study designs and trying to measure the impact that these technologies have for these young people. And it's quite a complex puzzle, isn't it, when you think about the individual needs from a mobility level, from a communication level, and then from a social participatory level as well. I think we'll get into what the specifics of some of those technologies are, but it's a really tricky puzzle to try and piece together, isn't it? Just to think about one person's needs and then trying to create an evidence base for that. That's very complex.
Can you talk us through some of the new technology that I know you've been involved in developing? Because I was at EACD, went to the brilliant experience room that you had there, absolutely phenomenal, and saw some of the technology that I know you guys have been so instrumental in developing. Can you please just describe what it is and how it meets a lot of the things that we've been talking about already?
You go maybe first.
You go for it, Elegast.
Well, if you talk about mobility, if you talk about the people with very severe complex movement disorders, they always have the challenges to really steer it. And you can compare it with when we drive a car and steer to the left, to the right. It's very similar with alternative or steering systems. But the fact, if you have complex movement disorders, you can compare it. If we give gas with our gas pedal in the car and we do that in a smooth way, then the car will drive in a very smooth way. But if you have that complex movement disorder with a fragmented movement, then the car will drive in a fragmented way. That's very similar for these people with complex movement disorder, like dyskinetic CP, like severe spastic CP. It's very difficult. And what we've done several years ago is, in the first place, increase our insight in how they were driving with head-foot steering systems, because that's using the basal control every child is born with. But how we translated that using new technologies, for example, artificial intelligence, using sensor data, using this, bringing this, pushing this through a computer and translate these fragmented movements into smooth driving.
Beautiful. Wow.
And if you look up, for example, to the co-moved steering system, it's exactly what we aim, because that's a game changer for them. Coming from that fragmented, interrupted, actually not high quality driving performance towards a very smooth driving. And the pathology, so spasticity, dystonia, and choreothetosis is still there. But that is filtered out by that algorithm, by that AI, by that system, computer, and translating it always in a smooth driving. And that's exactly what we aim, because that's quality of life. That's quality of indeed functionality, translated in participation, and again, higher quality of life.
It's incredible.
Gosh, love that.
And I was really intrigued by the amazing adaptive music instruments that were available. One of the projects we run an honor student collaboration with budding engineer. We team up with families and clinicians and try to develop toys and music instruments for children who are more severe, and so that they can have experience play and being able to sort of have create music. And I was so taken aback. There was this outstanding man who had developed amazing resources there.
The 3D printed onto the guitar with switches to change the chords. That was brilliant.
That was amazing.
Brilliant,
No, and then some of this in the space of communication, I don't think it was showcased as such there, but one thing that in order to sort of develop new technology for communication and have a real-time communication, enable real-time communication, we need a lot of data. To be able to decipher dysarthric speech. And there are some companies already that are doing some amazing work in that space. But we were talking earlier, like how important it is to have that individualization. So I think that we need more data. So one of the projects that I'm working on at the moment is called My Voice Library, and where we have gamified a data collection. So the children are being taken on this journey of fun facts that they need to repeat. And we collect a database and build. And what we're hoping for is by the end of it that we can make that available free to engineers and speech pathologists or anyone who hold ethics to have de-identified data. Because at the moment, the resources that are out there are a bit limited. Anyway, so we're hoping that we can make an exciting resource for more innovations to come.
I want to add about the cost of new technologies, because that's something that was always, there's always a question that is coming on the
always
table.
part of the conversation.
What is the price of it?
But
But in our breakfast seminar, we highlighted actually the return of investment, because if you have, for example, an alternative steering system like Comovit, there's a cost for it. Of course, for a powered wheelchair, there's a cost for it.
That's right.
But the return on investment, and we underpin that with figures, numbers, is that there is a return on investment for society. That's the first thing. That's how policymakers think. Okay, can we cut costs?
That's right.
Can we cut costs? But at the same time, you also have to measure what is the return of that investment. Again, for well-being, societal participation and quality of life. And for us, clinicians, researchers, people really helping these people with disabilities, that is the core. That is the core. And of course, we have to convince policymakers that's the price. And that's the return of investment you as a policymaker can have. But for us, it matters what is the return on investment, for example, for a powered wheelchair or for a speech computer, for our goal group. And that's crucial. That's core. That's the key.
And then I suppose how we achieve equity with that as well.
Exactly.
You know, that's
Again, it's about rights. It's a United Nations right to have that. For everybody.
And it's been wonderful to bring the conversation back to rights. Something we've been talking about a lot lately is, ICF has always been a governing, and it's important. It governs a lot of what it is we need to think about, assessment, intervention. But when you zoom out a bit from like just a human perspective, not just the diagnosis conditions on the top, you zoom out and you think about a person. And then it all just becomes really clear. And I love that research is heading in that direction where we're going, let's bring it back. Mobility is a human right. We've been talking about that a lot. Therefore, start early. Therefore, we put our resources to this, make sure we measure outcomes to help with this, the cost factor. But it's exciting direction.
It's an exciting direction. And it's also important to bring all these stakeholders together.
That's right.
That's exactly what we also tried to do in Bruges, to make sure that we have and researchers and clinicians and policymakers, but also the industrial partners to bring them together, because then you have a cross-fertilization and you have the 1 + 1 is 3 story.
That's right.
Equals much more. And that's really important because you reach much more together than alone.
I feel like this is just the tiniest taster of everything that obviously was covered in your breakfast session, but I think the breakfast session today encompassed a huge amount of work, from on both of your parts, and obviously the teams that you work with as well. So I feel like there's lots more to discuss in this space, and so we will have to organise a time to do that.
Let's do that and keep in touch with how we can help to promote everything that's been happening and on the new research, because
so crucial,
so vital. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for
so
having
much
us.
for speaking with us.
Thank you, Elegast. Thank you, Petra.
Thank you to everyone. I hope you really enjoyed that, but stay tuned. Of course, there is so much more. Bye.
Bye.